Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Happy Friday. It's Friday, which means we've got Funless Friday happening at some point today, 11 o'clock, top of the hour. I've got a guest coming on the show, Zach Perelis, I believe that's how you pronounce it, of CBS Sports. He wrote an article on Anthony Richardson that we're going to get into, talking about how do we manage his expectations coming off of an injury-riddled season, right, where he only played 12 quarters and all of those fun things. Now, Anthony Richardson, very interesting. I'm going to get into him here at some point during the show, but also location is interesting. Location is something that people keep telling me is incredibly important. Okay, like location is arguably the most important thing in a lot of different areas of life. Okay, my wife and I, we rent an apartment right now, which is cool. Renting's fine. I don't mind it. I don't have to pay to get the AC fixed when it goes out or anything like that. It's a flat rate. Like, I know what I'm paying every month. It's nice. It's nice. But eventually, my wife and I, we would like to buy a home. We'd like to own a house, all that fun stuff. And whenever it comes to looking for a house, people keep telling me that whenever the time comes, that when you buy a house, the most important thing is location. You can paint the walls. You can tear a wall down if you want. You can update the appliances. You can add on to the house even if you have the means and you want to do that, right? So, but here's the thing, though. When you buy a house, if it's in, the projects, you can't pick it up and put it on the beach. You can't do that. Right? So location is very important when you buy a house. When you're born, location is everything. I popped out in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Could have been better. Seriously, it could have been. It would have been nice to pop out in Beverly Hills, be a trust fund baby. That sounds really nice. But no, instead, I popped out in Arkadelphia. I've been cursed with this Arkansas Razorback fandom where we're just bad every year. It's terrible. Okay, but, wouldn't trade it for anything. Learned how to persevere throughout my life because I'm not a trust fund baby or anything like that. So it's all good. Have great parents, all that great stuff. But when it comes to location, it could have been worse. I could have been born in anywhere that's not America. Location is important. It's an important aspect in just about everything that happens in our lives. And when it comes to professional athletes, location is important because where you're drafted is the exact same thing. Where you go is everything. Now, when we think about this concept, it's not new. Okay, plenty of people have had this opinion before. Where you get drafted really matters. It's sometimes more important than how talented you are. Obviously, there are some players who are so talented that they can just, overcome whatever terrible organization that they wind up with, like Michael Jordan when he went to the Bulls. Horrendously bad organization. But he was so great that he overcame it and they won 6 titles. Now, whenever we think of this concept, that's often what we think of. We think of players like Matthew Stafford, Barry Sanders, and just a full list of other former Lions players that were good that couldn't overcome how awful that organization was. Obviously, they're in a much better place now, but potentially going to win the Super Bowl, could potentially win the NFC and all of those things. But I believe that this concept extends beyond great players on bad teams. This concept also seeps into depth and playing time. Okay, for example, when we look at the Miami Heat, right, in those prime years where it's the Heatles and it's LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, if you go to Basketball Reference and you look at their field goal attempts per game, it was the lowest number that they averaged in the prime of their careers, which makes sense, right? Because all 3 of those guys are playing together, and LeBron James has to sacrifice shots so that Dwayne Wade can take some, and Dwayne Wade is sacrificing shots so that Chris Bosh can take some. And then Ray Allen shows up, and they're like, oh, we should probably let that guy shoot a bunch of threes, so we're going to have to give up even more shots. It's part of it. When you go to a team that has depth and other talent, it impacts your numbers. It impacts the stats that you post because you're having to share reps more. In basketball, you're having to share shots. And in the NFL, this same concept of the more talented people that you play with, the less playing time you get is true, especially when it comes to defensive linemen. Now, I say all of that because I've gotten some pushback on my defenses of Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo, which is fine. You're allowed to be wrong. You are. Kwity Paye, Dio Dangbo are both good players that are victims of this Colts organization in a different way than you're probably thinking. Now, for context, here are Kwity Paye's numbers from last year. He recorded 52 tackles, a career high, 17 pressures, 8.5 sacks, a career high, in 16 games and 702 snaps played. Dio Dangbo, 38 tackles last year, 22 pressures, 8 sacks, a career high, in 17 games and 622 snaps played. I lay all that out to now tell you about the leading pass rushers, the leading sack getters in the NFL this previous season. TJ Watt had just a dominant year last year. Best pass rusher in the NFL has been for the past couple years. He logged 68 tackles, 50 pressures, and 19 sacks in 17 games. Here's the kicker, though. He played 935 snaps. That is 233 more than Kwity Paye and 313 more than Dio Dangbo. I would hope that he has better counting stats than Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo if he's playing that many more snaps than those guys. Josh Allen, edge rusher for the Jacksonville Jaguars, same thing. 66 tackles last year, 46 pressures, 17.5 sacks in 17 games. And he played 880 snaps. That's 178 more snaps than Kwity Paye and 258 more snaps than Dio Dangbo. Now, for reference on this snap count thing, a team runs on average about 60 plays a game on each side of the ball. So I'll let you do the math on basically how many more full games TJ Watt and Josh Allen were on the field for compared to Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo. Moving on to Khalil Mack, who falls in the same boat here. 74 tackles. That's a lot for an edge rusher. 36 pressures and 17 sacks in 17 games. And he played 934 snaps. That's 232 more than Kwity Paye and 312 more than Dio Dangbo. Of course, his numbers are better. Now, I am not insinuating that Kwity Paye or Dio Dangbo are better than any of the players that I just listed. But here's the thing. If Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo had been drafted by teams with less talent on the defensive line, they would be double-digit sack guys. They would be. If Kwity Paye had played for the Tennessee Titans last year, who didn't have a ton of depth on their defensive line, okay, the year that Kwity Paye was drafted, he was taken 21st overall by the Colts. With the 22nd pick, the Tennessee Titans took a defensive back. But if the Colts had passed on him and the Titans had taken him at 22, he'd have had 10-plus sacks last year because he would have played a lot more. And all the Chris Ballard haters out there would be complaining like, why didn't they take Kwity Paye? Seriously, where you go matters, especially if you're a defensive lineman, because the more talent you have on the defensive line, the less snaps these guys play. If Dio Dangbo and Kwity Paye both played an extra 200 snaps, which isn't that many, if they each played an extra 200 snaps, that still would have been less than TJ Watt played last year, and it would have been less than what Khalil Mack played last year. And it would have been around the same number of snaps that Josh Allen played last year for the Jaguars. If they each played an extra 200 snaps, they would be double-digit sack guys. They would be. And if all those players that I just listed, some of the best pass rushers in the NFL, Josh Allen, Khalil Mack, and TJ Watt, if they had played 200 less snaps, their numbers wouldn't have been as good. They wouldn't have been. You could argue, and I'm going to, that Chris Ballard has done such a good job at drafting and acquiring talent on the defensive line that it hurts him. Okay, he's got so many guys, 8 deep. That's what Gus Bradley said at the Colts' most recent press conference after training camp. 8 guys deep. When you're going 8 deep, you're rotating guys in and out. And because of that, it's hard to be a double-digit sack guy. It really is. And so we can sit here and we can complain about, oh, the Colts didn't have any double-digit sack guys. Chris Ballard's not that good at drafting defensive linemen. Isn't that supposed to be kind of his thing? Even though the Colts were tied for 3rd in the NFL last year in sacks. But yeah, you're right. Chris Ballard can't draft defensive linemen. Once again, Chris Ballard, when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, is simply a victim of his own drafting ability. Okay, he has done an excellent job over these past few years he definitely did last year, of acquiring talent on the defensive line that can get after the quarterback. And if he wasn't as good at it, then Kwity Paye and Daiwa Dangbo, they'd be double-digit sack dudes, and we'd be like, oh, we got some dudes. Okay, whatever. The only thing that Chris Ballard has done wrong during his tenure here in Indianapolis is it took him too long to find a replacement for Andrew Luck, and I don't even know if that was a mistake. Once again, Chris Ballard, a victim of his own drafting ability. So we all know about Andrew Luck, retired 5 years ago, just on a whim. We're stuck with a year of Jacoby Brissett. Okay, the Colts go 7-9. Do you know how hard it is to win 7 games when you're playing with a backup quarterback? Like you have to have a good coach, and you have to have other players on the roster that help elevate that quarterback to win that many games. And so they walk into the 2020 NFL draft, and we're like, I wonder who they're going to draft. They've got the 13th pick. They trade out of it. Okay, they trade out of it, and I don't blame them because all the quarterbacks that were good that year had all already been drafted. Justin Herbert was off the board. Tua was off the board. Joe Burrow was off the board. They were like there was no quarterback left for them to grab. And so they traded down. It's like, well, why didn't they trade up? You really think that the Chargers, Dolphins, or the Bengals were really going to trade out of the 1st, 5th, or 6th pick to have the 13th and miss out on a potential franchise quarterback? That wasn't going to happen. It's like, okay, what about 2021? Well, in 2021, Colts went 11-5, and they had the 21st pick, and they took a guy in Kwity Paye that was good last year. Would have been better if there weren't so many good defensive linemen on this Colts roster, and he played closer to 900 snaps. Right? He goes out, he grabs Phillip Rivers, they make the playoffs, and they were a good football team. And then 2022 comes around, and the Colts once again have a pretty mediocre year. They have literally the 16th pick in the draft. And what'd they do? They traded out of it. And it's like, oh, like, why didn't they trade up? Why didn't they try to grab a good quarterback? It wasn't a good quarterback year. It wasn't. The only quarterback that got selected was Kenny Pickett in the first round. He went 20th, and he's now a backup. So in 2020, there wasn't a quarterback on the board for them to take to look to replace Andrew Luck. So he goes out, he gets Phillip Rivers. They go 11-5. Right? So now you're picking 21st. There's not going to be a franchise quarterback sitting there waiting on you when you're at pick number 21. And look, you really think you're going to trade up with the Jaguars, go from 21-1 and draft Trevor Lawrence? No way. You think you're going to trade all the way up to 3? I'm glad they didn't, because guess who went number 3 that year? Trey Lance. He's pretty good, being the backup quarterback to Dak Prescott. Or they could have traded up to number 2. Oh, yeah, so they could take Zach Wilson. Come on now. There wasn't a true opportunity for Chris Ballard to draft a legitimate replacement for Andrew Luck until 2023. When they were bad the year prior, they had the 4th overall pick, and they took a guy in Anthony Richardson who was the best quarterback available at that point. He was. He's going to be better than Will Levis, a guy who completed 57% of his passes last year in 9 games. Chris Ballard has done a good job as the general manager of the Colts. You can tell me, well, the wins aren't there and all that stuff. And you're right. The wins haven't been there. They haven't won a division. They haven't, hosted a home playoff game. They haven't done anything like that. But it's not his fault that Andrew Luck randomly retired. Seriously, it wasn't. And you can go back, you can find a podcast where T.Y. Hilton said that year was the year that they thought they were really going to get over the hump. And then Andrew Luck was like, nah, I'm out. That's not on Chris Ballard. Okay, and he has continued to push through that and to put semi-competitive teams on the field. Okay, one of the things that really bothers me is when I interact with Colts fans, they act like this team was bad last year. If Gardner Minshew makes a throw, an easy throw, to a backup running back, which, according to a lot of Colts fans, that's on Shane Steichen. It should have been Jonathan Taylor on the field, so it's not really Chris Ballard's fault. But if he just makes a throw, they win the division, and then they play the Browns in the first round, and we saw how awful Joe Flacco was in that game. It's not on Chris Ballard, man. It's really not. So, Chris Ballard, I like him. I think he's done a good job. Okay, given the cards that he was dealt, and if he was worse at drafting and if he was worse at acquiring talent, this rebuild probably would have happened a little bit quicker. But no, he's been able to figure out ways to put enough talent on the field for the Colts to at least be mediocre despite having below average quarterback play, which is not easy to do because you don't win games in this league, especially close games against good teams, unless you have a legitimate option at the quarterback position. And the Colts haven't had that. Now they do. So I think the Colts are going to have a good year this year. I'm excited to see what Anthony Richardson brings to the table. Top of the hour, I've got Zach Perellis of CBS Sports. He wrote an article on quarterbacks coming off of injuries. Of course, we know our guy Anthony Richardson was on that list, so he's going to join me top of the hour at 11 o'clock, and we're going to talk a little Anthony Richardson. Before that, though, football's back, baby. We had the Hall of Fame game last night. We got a little peek at the new kickoff rules. I'm going to touch on that. The Olympics are going on. Team USA, incredibly boring. And I don't know why. I'm going to talk about that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Unadulterated sports talk with unfiltered takes. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Zach Perellis of CBS Sports, NFL writer. He's set to join me top of the hour. He wrote an article on not Anthony Richardson, but he's included in it. He's talking about quarterbacks coming off of injuries. What are expectations for those guys? Zach Perellis, CBS Sports writer, joining me 11 o'clock sharp. Be here for it. It's going to be great. Now, let's start with Team USA because I've got the Olympics on right now. I have enjoyed watching USA men's soccer more than I have enjoyed watching Team USA basketball, which is really weird for me. It really is, because if you've been listening to the show since I started, like six months ago, whatever it was, then I love basketball. Okay, like I'm if you're watching on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there, subscribe, watch the show, do all that fun stuff. Like I'm wearing a throwback Reggie Miller jersey. I love hoops. I've got a throwback New York Nets, New York Nets ABA baby, Dr. J jersey. I love basketball. Grew up watching a lot of hoops, grew up watching a lot of, hardwood classics on NBA TV when it was the off season. I love basketball, but not this Team USA team. They are so incredibly boring, and it doesn't make any sense, especially for a guy like me who's 24 years old. A lot of my basketball idols are on this basketball team. Some of the most popular athletes in the world are on this basketball team. Okay, the guys who dominated the NBA through my middle school and high school years and through college, they're all on this team. LeBron James, the most popular athlete in the world, him or Messi. It's probably Messi, but for the show, we're going to say it's LeBron James because, no other country exists outside of America. So LeBron James, the most popular athlete in the world, is on this team. Yeah, I find it boring. Kevin Durant, probably my second favorite player growing up behind the one and only Dirk Nowitzki, the greatest shooting big man of all time. Steph Curry's on this team. Loved watching Steph and kind of his emergence when I was in high school, right? And now they've got, Tyrese Halliburton on the team. He doesn't play a ton, so he's probably a bad example. But they've got Anthony Edwards, like the new kid on the block that people are just infatuated with. And yet for some reason, I am incredibly bored by this basketball team. I feel like I should want to watch them play. Okay, and it's not one of those things where they're just blowing everybody out, and so I have no interest. Like, if that was it, then I wouldn't be talking about this. Right? So, and when you look at their games, like when you go back, especially to their exhibition games, they're playing close games. Okay, like they're not covering the spread. They aren't. That coffee I had yesterday on Dan's show was awesome, by the way. It's interesting to me. Like, why isn't this team more interesting? Like, they've been labeled as the Avengers. Yet for some reason I'm incredibly bored by them. But I would show up and sit in a movie theater for 3 hours to watch literally any Marvel Avengers movie. Seriously. And yet this Team USA team comes on. I'm like, I think I'm going to watch swimming. I think I'm going to tune into the fencing. I don't know. It's an interesting thing for me. Are you entertained by this Team USA team? Seriously, like usually I am. Usually I'm locked into Olympic basketball. But this year, maybe it's just I feel as if the gold medal is in hand because of who they're playing. And I don't know. But they're really, really boring. And they shouldn't be. They should be so much more fun than what they are. What is fun is the NFL. Okay, we had the Hall of Fame game last night. Congratulations to the one and only Dwight Freeney, best edge rusher in the history of the Colts. Okay, holds the Colts rookie record for sacks in a season with 13. Okay, if you're expecting that from Laiatu Latu, you're going to be disappointed. Just letting you know right now. But anyway, congrats to Dwight Freeney. He got introduced at the Hall of Fame game last night. We got to sit back and watch the Houston Texans lose. That was great. Disappointed that Caleb Williams didn't get to play. I'm assuming he's going to get to play at some point during the regular season. Matt Eberflus decides not to play him. I think that's a mistake. because the jump from college to pro in any sport is astronomically large. Okay, like when you go from high school to college, is there a leap? Like, yes, of course. But we see 18-year-olds walk into the college game in, football and compete to win the Heisman. Tim Tebow did. Okay, we see freshmen in college basketball lead the country in scoring. We see them go number one overall in the draft. We see them, dominate. We saw Reed Shepherd last year walk into college basketball and shoot 50% from three. Like, going from high school to college is not overwhelmingly difficult, but making that leap from college to the pros is huge. Okay, it is. And I think that Caleb Williams needs just a little taste. Okay, let him play like 2 drives in the second preseason game and let him play 3 in the third and final preseason game, or just something along those lines. Because if he's going to go from NFL practice, which I'm sure is a little bit quicker, but let's be honest, there's just something extra that kicks in, a little bit of adrenaline that kind of shows up whenever you're doing the real thing. He needs to play at least a little bit. At least a little bit. And if he doesn't, I think that's a mistake by the Bears. When it comes to the Texans, I don't really care what they do. I hope they suck. I hope they don't play C.J. Stroud at all, and he comes out week 1, and he's super rusty, and the Colts pick him off twice, and they win, 42-20. That'd be awesome. Is it going to happen? Probably not. I'm assuming C.J. Stroud's going to play at some point. But for them, I hope they play I hope for Stroud and the Texans, I hope he plays as little as possible. Meanwhile, the Bears, get Caleb Williams out there. I say this selfishly because I want to see him play. I know you want to see him play as well. And if he waits until, week 1, when they play the Titans, that game's going to pull one heck of a number because I think people are intrigued by Will Levis. Will Brinson of CBS Sports, he was on my show earlier this week. He thinks Will Levis is going to be good. He thinks the Titans are going to be better than everyone's expecting. DeAndre Hopkins out 4 to 6 weeks with an injury over there. Should be good to go by the start of the regular season, though. But I don't know. When I look at the Titans, it seems like a bunch of old guys and a young quarterback with a rookie head coach. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think the Titans are going to be that good. But anyway, I digress. Let me get to the thing that I actually wanted to talk about. The new NFL kickoff rules. They're awesome. Love it. I love them. I think that it's going to work. I find it poetic. I think that's the word I'm looking for, that the year that Devin Hester gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he should be a Hall of Famer. He's the best kickoff/punt returner in the history of the sport. If you're the best anything, in a positive manner, of course, in the history of a sport, then you belong in the Hall of Fame. You do. Okay, and I'm glad that they're looking to make kickoffs an exciting play again. I'm glad that this is a play returning to relevancy. It was something when I was growing up that I always looked forward to. Okay, like the kickoff used to be arguably the most exciting play in the sport because there's nothing cooler than watching a guy weave in and out of, 21 other people for, 100 yards and a touchdown. It's cool. It's awesome. Now, I take a dump during the kickoffs, especially during college football, because in college football, the kickoff is only there to create room for another commercial because they go commercial, kickoff, commercial, and it upsets me every single time. Okay, I'm glad that they're looking to make this a relevant play once again. I'm hoping that college football adapts this rule as well. Okay, because with this rule change, we now have something to watch. Okay, it's not just oh, let me go use the restroom real quick. Oh, let me go grab a refill. Oh, let me go grab another beer. Oh, let me go grab another bottle of Moondrops. Maybe not a full bottle. Maybe just a little pour. But you see what I mean. Now this is something that we have to watch, and it was nice seeing it live for the first time. I think that we're going to see a slight shift in the returners that are back there. See, based off the old kickoff rules, I felt like it greatly resembled a receiver, catching the ball underneath, right? Where they catch it and then they look up and there's just a ton of space, right? And then you're kind of reading and reacting to where all of the space is, right? Meanwhile, now it's much more like a running back taking a handoff in shotgun, where you look up, the offensive line is like, I guess they're like 20 yards out in front, and then you're reading and reacting, trying to pick and choose holes. So I think that we're going to see a bit of a slight change. I think we're going to see a lot of running backs, like backup running backs especially, kind of get inserted into that kickoff returner role, just because of the way that the field is balanced and the way that the blocking works, right? Because originally, like, you caught it and there's just like 20 yards of space, probably more, like 20 to 30 yards of space. You get behind, the wall of guys, and then you run. Whereas now, it's like catch it. Everyone's trying to make a one-on-one block, and you're having to pick and choose. Okay, who's going to win their one-on-one block? Where's the hole coming? And that is something I think that much more reflects a running back and what they do well in terms of reading holes and ball carrier vision and all those things. I think it more closely reflects that, as opposed to, a wide receiver or a defensive back catching the ball with open space in front of them. So I'm interested to see how Anthony Gould kind of deals with all this stuff. Colts 4th-round pick. It'll be interesting. Can't really wait to see it. I've got more stuff coming up, 11 o'clock, top of the hour sharp. Zach Perez of CBS Sports, he wrote an article about quarterbacks coming off of injuries. Of course, he mentioned our guy, Anthony Richardson. You have to. So having him on at 11, can't wait for that. Funless Friday coming up soon, probably 11:20. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But when we come back here in about 4 minutes, I'm going to give you the 3 best. Lock them in. They're happening. The 3 best over-under win totals to bet this season. Okay, I've got them. They're cashing. All right, Zach, man, if you want to shoot me a text and tell me if you agree or not, that would be great. But the 3 best over-under win totals to bet, that's coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
More winners, more often. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy's Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket, 22 minutes away. Zach Perellis of CBS Sports is going to join me. Top of the hour sharp, 11 o'clock. We are talking Anthony Richardson. He recently wrote an article talking about quarterbacks coming back from injury. You know, our guy, Anthony Richardson, he had to be on that list. So we're going to talk about Anthony Richardson. That's coming up here in about 22 minutes. Once again, that is Zach Perellis of CBS Sports. In the meantime, I've got some other things that I have to talk about, including gambling. I've got the three best, lock them in. This is what's happening. 3 best over-under win totals to bet. Telling you right now, I'm not touching the Colts at 8.5. Okay? Don't touch them. Because if Anthony Richardson plays all 17 games, probably going to win 9 games or more. And if he doesn't, they're not going to win 9 games. Okay? They're not. Sorry, Joe Flacco. I have no faith in you whatsoever. Okay, the only 40-year-old quarterback in the NFL that I trust is Tom Brady. That's it. So don't touch that Colts line unless you're really confident that Anthony Richardson isn't going to play a ton this year, or unless you're really confident that Anthony Richardson is going to play a lot this year. Injuries are, I wouldn't call them a luck-based. Yeah, no. Injury luck is 1,000% a thing. Okay, so don't touch that Colts line. The lines I would touch, though, and would bet heavily. The Broncos, over 5.5 wins. This is a must bet. This is my favorite. No, actually, no, it's not. This is my second favorite. I've got one that I like just a little bit more. Broncos, over 5.5 wins. I don't bet against good coaches. I don't bet against great coaches. I don't. And Sean Payton is a great coach. He's one of the better coaches in the NFL. Okay, he's one of the 10 best coaches in the league. I don't think I'm going to get too much pushback saying that. I think everyone would agree that Sean Payton is one of the best coaches in the league. They won 8 games last year with old Russell Wilson as their quarterback. Seriously. And here's the thing. Bo Nix, who they took 12th overall, felt like a bit of a reach, felt like they could have gotten him a little bit later in the draft. But Sean Payton was like, no, that's my guy. I want Bo Nix. Bo Nix can't be that much worse than Russell Wilson. And once again, they won 8 games last year. Sean Payton, I wouldn't call him a quarterback whisperer, but he definitely knows what he's doing on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's going to do something pretty similar to what Shane Steichen's going to do this year with Anthony Richardson. He's going to dumb things down. He's going to make things as easy as possible for Bo Nix. They're going to move the chains. And look, I'm not saying that the Broncos are going to win that division. I'm not saying that the Broncos are going to win, 10 games. I'm not saying that the Broncos are going to make the playoffs. I'm just saying they're going to go like 7-10, and they only have to get to 6, baby. That's all that they have to do. They finished 3rd in their division last year. That sounds correct. And so because of that, like, you get a 3rd place schedule, which is going to be more favorable. Okay. The team got better as the year went on, right? They got trounced by the Dolphins. Okay. They lost, 70-21 or whatever it was. It's one of my very cherished memories. So my wife, Amelia, she's got a good friend and who's married. And we went over to their house for the game because my wife's friend that's married is married to a guy that's from Denver. Right. And so we're like, hey, let's hang out. So we go over, we're eating food. We're pretty intrigued by the game. I think we both kind of know that Miami's going to win. And so we're sitting back and we're watching this game. And as it's unfolding, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And we're sitting there and, my wife, Amelia's friend, she's sitting there. She's on her phone. She's not really paying much attention. And, her husband and I, we're chatting it up. We're talking about the new Broncos ownership and all those things. And, my wife's friend, she chimes up. She goes, hey, did you know that the Broncos owner graduated from Purdue? Which is not true. And we're both sitting there and we're both like, what? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like what's his name? And she goes, without skipping a beat, she goes, Raheem Morris, who is a Purdue grad, who was the running back for the Miami Dolphins. He scored like 6 touchdowns that week, and somebody went into Wikipedia and changed his Wikipedia page to the owner of the Denver Broncos. It was great. It was hilarious. It was a great time. Very cherished memory there. I got off track. Anyway, Broncos over 5.5 wins. That is going to happen, right? After they got blown out by the Dolphins, I think people kind of wrote them off. They got better as the year progressed, especially on the defensive side of the ball. No Russell Wilson, no Jerry Jeudy. That locker room should be a lot healthier, which really matters. I almost put the 49ers under on here. They're set at 11.5. I didn't, because there's just been a lot of off-field drama. Okay, I know that it's contract stuff and players understand that, but you can't tell me that there aren't guys in that San Francisco locker room like, bro, like we're trying to win a Super Bowl out here, and you're worried about yourself. Come on now. So anyway, Broncos over 5.5 wins. That locker room is going to be better. Bo Nix is going to be better than Russell Wilson, who may not even start in Pittsburgh. He may be the backup to Justin Fields. You got to suck. You must suck if you're the backup to Justin Fields. Jeez Louise. So Broncos over 5.5 wins, probably end up going like 7-10. Next here on the list, the one I'm least confident in, which isn't saying much because these are 3 locks. Kansas City Chiefs under 11.5 wins. Once again, Kansas City Chiefs under 11.5 wins. Their injury luck these last 2 seasons has been nothing short of incredible. Okay, Patrick Mahomes has played in like every game. If he does get hurt, he just kind of walks it off, and then he just proceeds to do amazing things. Travis Kelce, even though he's getting older, he's stayed pretty healthy. Their offensive line has stayed pretty healthy. Their best players on the defensive side of the ball, they've all stayed healthy. So I'm kind of waiting for this injury luck to kind of come back around and kind of start to punish the Chiefs at least a little bit, right? So that's a bit of projecting there, but let's look at cold hard facts when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs. L'Jarius Sneed, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, was playing for the Chiefs last year. He's no longer playing for them. He's playing now for the Tennessee Titans. So the Chiefs lose their best cornerback. Okay, when we look at the offense, there's question marks everywhere at wide receiver, just like there were last year. Okay, the reason why the Chiefs won so many games, and in all honesty, the reason why they won the Super Bowl was obviously in part because of Patrick Mahomes, because you don't win Super Bowls and you don't win playoff games unless you have a legitimate guy at the quarterback position. But they won a lot of games early because of that secondary and because of that defense. And losing your best corner is going to take a hit. Like, your defense is going to take a hit when that happens. Just look at the Colts last year. Stephon Gilmore left, and that secondary, not great. Still isn't great. It's terrible, actually. So the loss of L'Jarius Sneed is concerning. Doesn't really feel like they addressed that position in the offseason either. And then we get to the offensive side of the ball, and there's a large part of me that's like, they have Patrick Mahomes, so the offense is going to be fine. They have Andy Reid, so the offense is going to be fine. But when we look at this Kansas City Chiefs offense, it's Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Isaiah Pacheco, and Travis Kelce. I like the offensive line. But the receivers were bad last year. And they, they brought in Xavier Worthy, who's really fast, great, whatever. Would have preferred to have seen them bring in a bigger guy that could have contributed immediately. Like, Xavier Worthy's tiny. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a video, making its way around Twitter of him just getting knocked off of his routes. And when teams get to bump and run him, man, he gets in trouble. Now, obviously, the Chiefs will do some schematic things to keep that from happening. But either way, like, he's unproven. It's like, what, are they really going to rely on Kadarius Toney? I don't think that they want to do that. They're going to rely on Sky Moore. I don't think they want to do that. Rashee Rice has got a ton of off-the-field issues, with the weed and the driving way too fast and wrecking the car and then leaving. Like, he's got 1,000,001 issues off the field. So is he even going to be available to start the season? The NFL hasn't ruled any sort of suspension or anything yet. We're still waiting for that to happen. So there's a lot of question marks when it comes to the receivers as well, which was an issue for the Chiefs this previous season. The division also got better because the Chargers hired Jim Harbaugh. That is no longer 2 free wins for the Chiefs. They're going to actually have to go and earn those games. So there's all that. And also, at some point, if you're the Chiefs, you're like, we're the freaking Kansas City Chiefs. We've got the best quarterback maybe ever. We can shut it down. Like, we can afford, to be the wild card, okay, and still get to and potentially win the Super Bowl. Okay, we see NBA teams do this all the time, or we've seen them do it in the past at least, where they'll just kind of coast and they'll be like the 4 or 5 seed, and it's because they sacked guys and did a bunch of load management. And they were like, at the end of the day, like, we still have all these dudes. We're going to be fine. It doesn't matter if we go on the road or not. The Chiefs proved that last year, right? They went to Buffalo and won and did a whole bunch of other stuff like that during their playoff run. But that's just kind of what I think is going to happen. I think at some point they're going to shut it down. Maybe they get off to a slow start because they're still decently banged up. Like, it takes a while to recover, man. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see what they do. Injury luck, I don't think is going to be as good this year. That's a projection. They lost important players on defense, and I don't think anyone trusts that Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver room. And look, those guys are confident. They know they can win in the playoffs, and they know they don't have to be at home to do it. Expect for them to shut it down maybe a little early. I wouldn't say that they're going to take a game off, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. Give me the Kansas City Chiefs under 11.5 wins. Now, my favorite bet. Okay, my favorite bet, if I was Dan Dockich, I would call this a house bet. The Los Angeles Rams over 8.5 wins. Are you really telling me, Las Vegas, that you think that the Los Angeles Rams are going to be about as good as the Indianapolis Colts this year? Both win totals set at 8.5. Do we really think that the Rams, the team that's not only going to win more than eight games, the team that's also going to win the NFC West, we really think that team is only going to hover around 8.5 wins? No freaking way. They have the best coach in the NFC in Sean McVay. They have the best quarterback in the NFC in Matthew Stafford. Puka Nacua is a monster. In a rebuild year last year, they made the playoffs. Okay, Cooper Kupp, an absolute stud, one of the best receivers in the NFL. This is an offense that's going to score points. And I know that because they have Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, who just posted the best rookie receiving season ever, and they have Cooper Kupp. Okay, that is 4 guys that is going to help them generate a ton of points. Okay, and if you think Matthew Stafford's old, he's like 35, 36. Okay, Aaron Rodgers is 40 years old and he's doing just fine. I just saw Tom Brady play until he's 44. LeBron James is the best player on Team USA and he's 40. Like, I think we need to start kind of rethinking what old is in sports because technology and medicine is, I think, revolutionized that. So I think Matthew Stafford is going to be just fine as long as his wife doesn't come out and admit to having sex with any of his teammates in the past. I think he'll be okay. So they have the best coach, best quarterback in the NFC, 2 outstanding receivers. They're going to win 7 games just off of outscoring people. Okay, if your argument for the Los Angeles Rams to win less than 9 games is, well, the defense. Aaron Donald retired. Okay. So what? They've addressed those issues in the offseason. I thought they had an outstanding offseason. They addressed their defensive issues in free agency. They brought in 3 new defensive backs. They needed help at corner after Jalen Ramsey was traded away to the Miami Dolphins. They bring in Tre'Davious White. They bring in Cameron Curl. They brought in 3 new defensive backs to kind of help bolster the back end of that defense. So that shouldn't be as big of an issue. They addressed some offensive line issues, especially on the interior, bringing in 2 new offensive guards that they've signed long-term, big money. One guy coming over from the Lions who was a part of potentially, the best offensive line in football last year. Okay, so they've addressed the offensive line struggles, and you're like, well, Jonathan, Aaron Donald, one of the best defensive players ever, he's not there. What did they do there? Well, they got extremely young. Okay. And they were young at edge rusher last year, but they are even younger now. Okay. They had 1 million picks in this year's NFL draft. They used their first round pick on an edge rusher, Jared Verse out of Florida State, who a lot of draft people were high on. I like him. I think he's a good player. They used their second round pick on a defensive tackle out of Florida State, who's pretty good. They used their fifth round pick on another defensive lineman, and they used their sixth round pick on another defensive lineman. So they got very young. They should be deep. Okay. I'm telling you, this Los Angeles Rams team isn't just going to win more than 8.5 games. They're going to win the NFC West. That's a very quiet camp, and that's something else that we have to pay attention to. Camps that are quiet tend to come out and play well. Okay, like there's been a lot of offseason noise in San Francisco, which has me a little worried about them. A lot of offseason noise with the Kansas City Chiefs, all these dudes getting arrested. Meanwhile, the Los Angeles Rams just hanging out. Nose to the grindstone, up early, watching film, developing, players and new plays. And I cannot wait to watch that team play football this year because they're going to be one of the better teams in the league. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they won the NFC West. And also wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they won the NFC in general. All of the issues that they had, they addressed in the offseason, whether through free agency. Hey, Chris Ballard, you can address issues through free agency. That is an option, just so you know. I know you're listening right now, Chris. So, that is an option. So they addressed issues through free agency, and then they addressed their other issues with their 1,000,001 draft picks. They had 10 picks this last year. And everything went towards a need that they had. Coming up, 5 minutes. Cannot wait. Zach Perez, NFL writer for CBS Sports. He wrote some stuff on Anthony Richardson, expectations coming off of the injury. Cannot wait to have him on. That is coming your way here in about 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for...
It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hour number 2 underway. Zach Pirles of CBS Sports wrote an article yesterday on quarterbacks returning from injury and just kind of expectations for those quarterbacks. He joins me now. Zach, what's going on, man?
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
Man, it's going pretty great. I have a job in radio, so it's hard to complain, you know?
Absolutely. Football on TV last night, too.
Dude, okay. Before we get into your article, what'd you think of the NFL rules, of the new kickoff rules?
Yeah, I love it. I love that it's a play that matters. I think we're probably not going to see like anything too crazy in the preseason. You know how coaches, just like on offense and defense, they hide more than they show during the preseason. So I think for now it'll probably look pretty similar to last night as teams kind of figure out what they're doing. But once the regular season hits, I'm really excited that the play matters again, and especially in a year when Devin Hester went into the Hall of Fame for being really good at that exact play. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It
is. I said the exact same thing earlier. You know, the kickoff used to be a play where you'd go like use the restroom, go grab another drink, go grab more food, because they were just going to kick it out of the back of the end zone. And then that was kind of going to be it. I do think I'm interested to see what types of players teams put back there. I think we're going to see a pivot to a lot of running backs returning kicks just because of how it's set up now. You know, it's not like a receiver where you catch the ball in space and then you're kind of weaving in and out of dudes. Now it's kind of more like a shotgun handoff type of play. What do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think I've been out at the Washington Commanders camp, and they've had all sorts of guys back there. They've brought in some guys. It's been really interesting to see kind of how they're approaching it, the new drills that they're using to kind of prepare guys to it. It really is kind of more like a running play. And thinking of it that way, I also wonder if, you know, the blockers, the guys who are, you know, the other 10 guys who are on special teams, are they going to be tight ends more than linebackers? You know, because typically you've seen a lot of linebackers and defensive backs on special teams as blockers. And maybe now it's going to be more tight ends and more, you know, really good blocking wide receivers too. So going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I think as the season progresses, it's one of these rules that is going to get better. Teams are going to get better at it. Referees are going to get better and, you know, understand all the nuances. I think it's going to be a really fun development.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. That's a great point on the blockers as well. I didn't even think about throwing tight ends and those guys out there. Joined by Zach Pirles of CBS Sports, NFL writer. So I want to pivot now to the article that you wrote yesterday on quarterbacks returning from injury, kind of the expectations that you have for them. So let's start with Anthony Richardson, our local guy here in Indy. Before we talk about this year, what did you think about the limited snaps that we saw from him last year?
Yeah, I mean, the best way that I can put it is there's so much reason to be really, really excited about him. And then you also have to remember he played in 4 games and only finished 2 of them. So I loved what I saw from him. I loved what I saw from Shane Steichen. And I loved what he said this offseason. Like, you don't tell Steph Curry to stop shooting threes. And I know that Anthony Richardson has played 4 games and Steph Curry is the greatest 3-point shooter ever. But yeah, this is what makes Anthony Richardson special. Like, he is that good. We saw it in that small sample size. We basically saw everything that we kind of expected in terms of he can be a little bit wild, throwing the ball a little bit inaccurate, but the physical skills are off the chart. I really thought that Shane Steichen put him in advantageous positions. He's obviously like an absolute stud right near the goal line as well. And that's a big, big deal. I'm really, really excited to see what's in store in year 2, because that's when a lot of players and especially quarterbacks take a big jump.
What do you think, or what would be a successful season for Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I think just because of how last year went, I think the first thing has to be health. Like, is this a guy who you can rely on? I think that if he can play the entire season, or, you know, almost a lot of quarterbacks we don't even realize miss a game here or there. You'd love to see him play all season long. It's interesting that Steichen came over from the Eagles, and I noted in that article that he kind of used Anthony Richardson similarly to how he used Jalen Hurts. Like, he takes advantage of the physical tools. So I think that, and Jalen Hurts is a guy who gets, kind of banged up by the end of the year, but he has played. He's been back there, pretty consistently. So number one is health. And then number two is just, the little improvements on the things that are easy is the thing that I like to say. Them hitting on those easier throws, taking the easier plays. He's a guy who loves to air the ball out downfield. He's looking for those big plays, and he certainly has the arm to do it. But I want to see, more of him hitting on the easier stuff. Maybe getting the accuracy dialed in a little bit. But I really like where his starting point was. I think as a rookie, there's so much to be excited about going into year two. So I think success is being on the field, hitting on the easier stuff, just making the simple plays, sometimes the shorter plays, not only choosing to make those plays, but also converting on them.
Joined by Zach Pierles of CBS Sports NFL writer. So you brought up the health, right? Which is going to be a thing with everyone on this list that you made. So, and you mentioned, also the physical tools and how that's part of what makes Anthony Richardson. How would you, I guess, balance the designed runs? Because, he's going to scramble, right? When plays break down in the pass game. I'm of the opinion that, like, between the 20s, I'm going to run Jonathan Taylor. When I get down into the red zone, I'm going to use Richardson's size and probably run him there in terms of, like, designed runs. How would you balance, keeping Anthony Richardson off his back, but also wanting to run him and use those legs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think that he is a guy who you can't take it away. You have to, put those plays in and use them to your advantage. You have to give him those RPO options where he keeps the ball. And especially I'm really excited to see him with Jonathan Taylor. But yeah, I think that I don't know if you dial it back so much as Anthony Richardson's going to be a little bit smarter. He's, the speed of the game is one thing that is a big deal. There's no way to simulate the speed of a game in practice and preseason. And you saw, I think in the regular season, you just saw like Anthony Richardson is used to being the best athlete on the field, and he still might be the best athlete on the field when you think about his size and his speed. But the other players are so much closer. Those runs up the sideline, you've got to get out of bounds a step earlier. Just everything closes down a little bit quicker. So in terms of balancing it, I still think that you let Anthony Richardson be him, maybe not so heavily, or maybe you design plays where you're expecting him to be closer to being able to get out of bounds, closer to being able to slide, things like that. I just think getting him in space is going to be a big, big deal, and manufacturing those touches is going to be a big deal. But I think the biggest thing is he will understand the timing better, what he can and can't do. He's used to being such a dominant athlete, and he's still a dominant athlete, but maybe not like so far above and beyond the defenders on the field as well.
Are you more excited to watch Anthony Richardson run the ball this year or throw it?
Yeah, that's I think that's, I think what's so great about it is that you can make arguments for both legitimately.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see, we've seen the run game in pieces. I'm really excited to see what a full off season looks like for Anthony Richardson throwing the ball. I like what they've done with the offense. I think Josh Downs is a really, really good player in the slot.
Yeah.
A.D. Mitchell is going to bring, just ridiculous athlete, and Chris Ballard loves his athletes. So I think A.D. Mitchell is going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, Michael Pittman has evolved into one of the best, wide receivers. I really think that he made a big jump. You see, obviously, like kind of the possession skills where he uses his size, but also being able to get downfield and have a big catch radius. So I'm excited, obviously, to watch Anthony Richardson run. It's kind of one of these things where you just sit back and smile and watch a huge dude run this fast. But I'm excited more to see the progress of his throwing, see if that accuracy has been dialed in a little bit more, and also what Shane Steichen dials up for what I think is a good, maybe even a little bit underrated receiving group as well.
Okay. Joined by info writer Zach Peerlez of CBS Sports. I think you're exactly right. I'm interested to see what this offense looks like. There's a lot of younger pieces. Like Josh Downs is only in his second year, even though I thought he was really good last year. Alec Pierce only in his third year. A.D. Mitchell only a rookie. Michael Pittman, I think it's his fifth year in the league. But none of it works unless the offensive line shows up. I don't know how much you've looked into the Colts offensive line. I may be asking you a bad question here, but what are kind of your thoughts on how the Colts look up front?
Yeah, well, I thought what was really interesting is 2 years ago you looked at this group and you said, "Oh my goodness, this is a huge problem point." And I thought that they were a lot better last year. You got Quentin Nelson back to playing really good football. Ryan Kelly was obviously a huge return there. I think Bernard Raymond's again, like I said, Chris Ballard loves his athletes. Bernard Raymond, good athlete. Excited to see what he does. Yeah, I think that it's a good group, and obviously it's a group where a lot is demanded of you because of what they want to do in the quarterback run game. So yeah, I think that this is a group that certainly got better last year, and you're right. It was 2 years ago you looked at this line and you were really worried about it. I think it's gotten a lot better. And I think like it's certainly a workable line. And while a mobile quarterback asks more of your line, he also bails you out of a lot more situations. So, especially that left side of the line, I'm excited to watch. And I definitely think it's a serviceable offensive line, and we'll see what Anthony Richardson can do with it going from there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like it's there's been improvement, especially from the younger tackles. Bernard Raymond was a lot better last year. I think that's why we saw so much of the improvement. So I've been thinking a lot about Anthony Richardson and Shane Steichen. And like when I look in San Francisco and I look at Brock Purdy and I look at Kyle Shanahan, it feels like a lot of the success for Purdy is because of Shanahan. And Shane Steichen, obviously he's not Shanahan, but falls in this same kind of class of he's able to make life easier on his quarterback. What do you need to see from Anthony Richardson to feel like the success that he's having is because of him versus Shane Steichen just making life a little bit easier on him?
Yeah, I think, it's such an interesting when we talk about, the best play callers in the NFL. You look at a Shanahan, you look at a Sean McVay and how they really elevate their quarterbacks. The biggest thing for me for Anthony Richardson, I think, is just making the plays that have to be made just to keep your offense on schedule. It's a lot of fun when you watch, a run for 2 yards and then maybe Richardson misses on a pretty basic throw and then it's 3rd and 8. And it's a lot of fun when he can scramble for 10 yards or 15 yards on 3rd and 8 and you see, oh my God, he's one of, 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the NFL that can do that. But I think that's not always going to be sustainable. You're not always going to make those scrambles. You're not always going to have those big plays. So I think on a down-to-down basis, I just need to see Anthony Richardson hitting the easy throws, just maximizing, matching the physical skill with the consistency. I talked a little bit, I think Jalen Hurts is a good example of a guy who has really improved just his down-to-down consistency, especially when you think about that 2022 year when they went to the Super Bowl. Josh Allen, another guy who was like, he still has that trick shot, crazy arm talent, huge arm throws, but he's gotten better and he still has room to go in terms of making the basic plays, making those baby steps, and just it's okay to hit a 5-yard check down to get you in 3rd and 3 instead of 3rd and 8. So yeah. I'm really interested to see kind of those second reaction plays where Anthony Richardson can't run and has to get through his reads, check the ball down. Just keeping the offense on schedule is going to be so helpful for him. And Shane Steichen can sit there and say, the more we're on schedule, the more I can open things up, the more I can be really creative. So I'm really interested to see his down-to-down improvement. You look at a guy like, you mentioned Kyle Shanahan, like Brock Purdy. Yeah, you can say he has these great weapons and it's not really him. It's the play calling and the weapons, but he does a really good job of making those simple plays. And then all of a sudden you look at his ridiculous stats, and some of it's Shanahan, some of it's the supporting system, but a lot of it is Purdy just making the throws he has to make to keep his offense on schedule. And then it's one of these things where it builds on each other. You make the throws you have to make. You're putting your play caller in more advantageous positions. You're putting your playmakers in more advantageous positions. So it's all one and the same, but it starts with those basic throws that keep you on schedule.
Without a doubt, joined by Zach Pirlez, an NFL writer for CBS Sports. I want to transition now to another guy on your list that just can't stay out of the media. It seems like everybody just kind of has to talk about the guy. Aaron Rodgers. Obviously 40 years old, coming off of this Achilles injury. The Jets are an interesting organization. It kind of feels like if it doesn't work this year, a bunch of guys are going to get fired. How do you kind of view the Jets being this year, and how do you view Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so funny. Like, there's any questioning the talent. And I think that this is a Jets team that like can be really, really good. You look at how good the defense is, how good it should continue to be. But yeah, I think I wrote in the article, like, Aaron Rodgers is going to be the biggest, storyline or barometer of his team's success, no matter what he does. Like, if he's hurt again, you look at this as a disastrous trade for the Jets. If he is really, really good, you look at this as like, this is a bona fide Super Bowl contender, and this 40-year-old quarterback is coming off a torn Achilles like it's nothing. So whatever's going to happen, I'm really the Jets are just going to be such an interesting team no matter what happens. I'm a little worried in terms of just like why things aren't as easy as they could be. I go back to this Aaron Rodgers talking about there have to be no distractions, and then all of a sudden he's in Egypt and missing, mandatory mini camp. So I just am, there's so much to be excited about, and there's so much to worry about with this team. And that's not even mentioning like this is a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles. Like, that is a huge injury, and a guy who is, at the tail end of his career. That's not just something that we can overlook and, oh, he's moved past it, whatever. So I'm really interested to see what happens there. Nathaniel Hackett is calling the plays. He's a guy who has not had a lot of success recently. So there is, it's like a hot seat for the entire team in New York. And I think Aaron Rodgers, I don't think that we should expect Aaron Rodgers at his peak or even close. But when you look at the quarterback play they've gotten there, if he's just solid, makes throws, gets Garrett Wilson involved, they can run the ball. The offensive line is really improved, I think, in theory, but Tyron Smith going to stay healthy. So it's like there's almost like a storyline for every single major player on that team, and it's the only team that has that distinction.
It really is. Joined by NFL writer Zach Pirlez of CBS Sports. Last question, and I will let you go. So you've got, I think, 8 quarterbacks on here, if I counted right. Which one of these guys coming off of an injury do you think is going to have the best year? And you can't say Joe Burrow, because I feel like that's the easy answer.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, it's always hard to say like best in terms of like what's the expectations. Like,
yeah,
if Daniel Jones keeps his job, like that might be the best the best
Fair
quarterback
enough.
performance we see relative to expectations. And again, like, Rodgers is one. I'm interested to see what Kirk Cousins does in Atlanta. I think that his combination of like what he does well, which is basically coming from this Sean McVay offensive tree, he's staying in a very similar system. And that big three of weapons in Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, and Drake London, like, they hypothetically fit his strengths really well. Kirk is a guy who is willing to take those, deep middle shots. I love watching quarterback, and he's just getting absolutely plastered on these deep dropbacks and hanging in there until the last second. But I really like how those three options fit him. I understand he's also coming off the Achilles. He's also not a young guy, but I think he has a really strong fit there. There's a really good offensive line there in Atlanta. And I'm just really excited to see what he does there in terms of having those three excellent offensive weapons in a system that it's new, but it's extremely familiar. I think that like, and you're going to see like he's going to have the opportunity to put up big numbers because that Falcons defense really worries me. So I'm going to slide Kirk Cousins in there. I think people didn't realize how well he was playing last year. And I think it's a great fit, and he's going to have a really strong season with a really, really good top three skill position players.
Yeah, that's a great point. The guys around him are potentially the best out of all the guys you have here on this list, which is a great reason to pick him. Zach, dude, you're awesome. Gonna have you back on here at some point, dude. You were great. I appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I will say for your listeners, Anthony Richardson's highest ceiling of the guys coming back. So we'll leave you with that.
I like it. I like it. Thanks for your time, man.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You got it. That was Zach Pirles of CBS Sports, NFL writer. I hope I said his last name right. He told me before he came on the air, and I think I butchered it every time I said it. But hey, it doesn't matter. Loved having him on. He was great. Coming up here in 4 minutes, Fun List Friday. Love doing this bit. It's one of my favorite ones to do. That's coming your way here in about 4 minutes.
Often imitated, never duplicated. It's the real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Tickets, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Just had a fantastic interview with CBS Sports NFL writer Zach Pierles. He was awesome. Tons of talk about Anthony Richardson. He wrote a thing on basically quarterbacks coming back after being injured and expectations for those guys. That E word, man. We're throwing it around every day here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Expectations. It's all we talk about. Not really, because we're about to switch it up with a little bit of fun list Friday. And I'm excited for this one. I think this one's going to be fun. It's supposed to be fun. It's Funless Friday. These are the absolute worst places to wear a jersey. This one, it's near and dear to me. So whenever I do these lists, I've got some people that I'll text. I usually throw a, hey guys, like I've got a group chat of all my groomsmen, and I throw it in there. I'm like, hey guys, like doing this on Friday. If you have any ideas, just let me know. And one of my buddies, shout out to my buddy Jason, he was like, don't answer this one, since like 60 to 75% of your closet is just jerseys, which is not true. It's more like 30%, So this one, it's near and dear to me. And so I ended up throwing it into a different group chat with a bunch of women, and they had many, many thoughts. So I narrowed it down to 8. Okay, these are the 8 worst places to wear a jersey. Number 1, a funeral. Have a little respect, okay? Even if it's a black jersey, even if you're pulling up and you're like one of those old school like Miami Vice Dwayne Wade jerseys that are like all black, can't do that. That's disrespectful. There's no other word. There's no other way to really describe it. So, yeah, can't wear a jersey to a funeral. That's not going to go well for anybody. So, next on the list, a proposal. Guys, young dudes out there, do not propose to, your girlfriend in a jersey. I think it'd be kind of cool. But at the same time, as a guy who's hopefully going to have kids at some point, if I have a daughter, I'd be like, yeah, you're going to tell her no. Okay, if I proposed to my wife, Amelia, in a jersey, she would have said no. And I wouldn't have blamed her. I'd have been like, you know what? You're right. It's giving frat boy vibes. Someone's going to show up and start taking photos of us. So, yeah, let me maybe not wear the jersey when I'm asking you, one of the most important questions you're ever going to be asked. So, yeah, don't wear a jersey during the proposal. Don't wear them during engagement photos unless they're sports themed. That'd be so sick. That'd be incredible. And engagement photos that are sports themed would be awesome. I don't know what that would really look like, but I think it would look incredible. So don't wear them during engagement photos. Obviously, don't wear them to a wedding either. Okay, like there's no need. Like I was at a wedding 2 weekends ago, and if I had showed up, like a Bulls Michael Jordan jersey, all the guys would have been like, that's sick. And the bride would have been like, what are you wearing? Like you're not allowed to be in any photos. Okay. So yeah, don't wear it to a wedding. Don't wear it to the opera. Okay. Gotta rock a tie if you're going to the opera. I don't know why. That just kind of seems what fits the vibe. So don't wear a jersey to the opera, even though I think it'd be sick, especially if you got like a personalized one that was like themed with whatever opera you were going to see, or really just musical in general. Like don't pull up to Les Mis in a LeBron James jersey. I don't think that anybody there would be appreciative of that. Okay. So yeah, don't wear a jersey to the opera. Next, a job interview. I have the best job in the world, highly relaxed. Yeah, there's no way I would pull up to a radio, like a sports radio job interview in a jersey. With that being said, I love my dad so much. And I will never forget, we were living in Murfreesboro and his resume was out and he was traveling around, doing interviews and stuff. And he got flown out for an interview in Dallas. And he was like, what's the attire? Which is a great question to ask if you're going in for a job interview. Okay. And, what's the attire? And the guy's like, casual. My dad's like, okay, great. And he shows up in jeans and a Chicago Cubs jersey. And I was like, geez, Dad, I don't know about that one. Gritty, chiming in saying that if you were at a ball game and wearing a jersey, that's acceptable for a proposal. That's true. That's very true. If you're at a ball game and you propose there, that's it's a great point. Gritty continuing on to say that she would expect for her future fiance to propose to her in Assembly Hall. That is the exception, though, not the rule. I think for the most part, like if you're gonna drop down on one knee at like the canal, maybe don't wear a Reggie Miller jersey. I don't know, but you're right. If you're at a game, that is the exception. I will undoubtedly there on that. Next, don't wear a jersey to court. Okay, like I really hope that when Rashee Rice, because I'm assuming he's gonna have to go to court at some point for the hit and run and the weed and just all the other, not okay things that he's done. I'm assuming he's gonna have to go to court. And if he like pulls up and like in his Rashee Rice jersey, I think that would be a mistake. If you wear a jersey in court, you just give off these like delinquent vibes, and that's not what you want. That's not what you want. You want to come off innocent, show up, buttoned up t-shirt, some nice dress pants, maybe throw in a tie. I don't know, just throwing it out there. But yeah, don't wear a jersey to court. You look like a delinquent that was in a frat not that long ago. Speaking of frat, do not. I think this one is a must. Do not, unless you're at a ball game, do not wear a jersey the first time you meet your girlfriend's parents. That no, like just no. Like you're gonna give off immediate frat boy vibes. Like for me, as someone who hopes to have kids one day, like if I have a daughter and I meet her boyfriend and he pulls up in a jersey, I'm gonna be like, nah, dog. No way. I don't care if this is like a relaxed, chill out, backyard barbecue type thing. Looks semi nice. Okay. I'm not saying, you got to show up in like a full suit to meet your girlfriend's parents. I'll never forget when my sister was in high school. She was dating this guy. And my family is very relaxed. Okay. Like we're super chill. My dad's a pastor, and so I think people assume that we can be a little tight. That's just not the case. Okay. Like we're very, very relaxed. We make fun of each other. We pick at each other all the time. That's just kind of how we are. And I'll never forget my sister dating this guy, pulls up to meet my parents, who are just the most relaxed people you'll ever meet, pulls up in a full blown suit. And they're like playing skip bow. And he's like decked out, super nice suit, really nice watch. My dad's in like, sweatpants and a t-shirt. My mom's in jeans and a t-shirt. My youngest brother's, probably just in like basketball shorts and a tank top. My sister's probably in something pretty relaxed as well. And bro's just chilling there in a suit. I think that's the question. Would it be better to meet your girlfriend's parents in a jersey or in like a full-blown suit? I don't know. Probably the suit. I don't know. But either way, don't wear a jersey the first time you meet your girlfriend's parents. It's not going to go very well for you. Something that has gone well for the Colts, though, is, I would say, drafting defensive linemen. I'm going to get into that when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Oh, man, what a day. Zach Pirles, geez, I almost said his name wrong again. He joined me earlier today at 11. Great interview. Talked for like 20 minutes on Anthony Richardson. It was awesome. You can get that. You can hear that interview via the Real Jonathan Smith podcast, wherever you get your podcast. After the show is over, that will be uploaded. Oh, yeah. Now, location. It's highly important. It dictates just about everything. Okay, it's the most important thing in many different areas. Okay, like for me, like me and my wife, we're renting an apartment right now, which I don't really mind. I kind of like it, paying a flat fee every month. Don't have to worry about if the AC breaks or, our dryer broke a couple months ago. Didn't have to pay to fix it. It's really nice renting. But eventually, we're going to want to move into a house. Okay, and people tell me, because I don't know, I've never bought one. People tell me, though, that when you buy a house, location is the most important thing. Okay, you can change the color of the walls. You can update the appliances. You can tear down a wall if you want to, which I think is really cool. Big fan of just tearing down walls with hammers. That sounds like fun. You can update the appliances, but, like if you buy a nice house in, I don't know, Brownsburg. And for whatever reason, you don't want to live in Brownsburg. You'd rather live in Carmel. You can't pick the house up in Brownsburg and just move it to Carmel. That isn't how houses work. Okay? As everyone knows, location is very important. When you're born, location. Location is everything when you're born. I popped out in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Could have been better. Okay? Popping out in Arkansas means I'm now enslaved to this fandom of the Arkansas Razorbacks where they do nothing but disappoint me year in and year out. I'm sure that there's some people out there my age, around 24 years old. You feel the same way about IU. It's like, geez, like I couldn't have been born, in like Missouri, be like a Chiefs fan. That'd be great. But anyway, but yeah, like it could have been better. Could have been born in like Beverly Hills with some trust fund parents. That'd make my life, that'd be sick. That'd make my life so much easier. But love my parents. They're great. Very happy that I popped out in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, because it could definitely be worse. Like I could have popped out in anywhere that's not America. Okay, like location is everything. And when players get drafted, it's the exact same thing. Where you go, the location, the organization that you end up with is everything. Okay, and this isn't some new concept. I think everyone knows that who you get drafted by is oftentimes more important than even how good you are. Because there's a very small number of athletes that are so great that they just transcend anything that's bad around them. Okay, like for example, Michael Jordan was so great and so amazing that it didn't matter that the Bulls were terribly ran. They still won 6 championships. Okay, like Tom Brady, didn't matter that the Patriots never worried about the offensive side of the football. He was so great that he won 6 Super Bowls in New England and then won another one in Tampa Bay. Okay, so where you go matters. And when we think about this concept, I think players like Matthew Stafford and Barry Sanders and a full list of other former Lions players come to mind. But this concept extends beyond great players on bad teams. Okay? This concept also seeps into depth and playing time. When you look at the field goal attempts in the primes of LeBron James's, Dwayne Wade's, and Chris Bosh's careers, their lowest numbers of attempts came when they all three played together, which makes sense. LeBron James, he has to give up shots so that Dwayne Wade can get some, and Dwayne Wade has to give up shots so that LeBron and Chris Bosh can get some, and Chris Bosh is giving up shots so that LeBron can have some. Like the more depth and the more talent that you have, the more you have to share, which is cool, right? Like not a big deal. Okay, like I don't think that LeBron, Dwayne Wade and Bosh were all like complaining about this, right? And then Ray Allen showed up and they're like, yeah, we got to let that guy shoot the ball, so we're going to give up even more shots. That's just the way that it goes, and it makes sense. The more talent you have around you, the more you have to give up. That's one of the interesting things about watching Team USA play basketball. It's like, who's deferring to who? Who's giving up the most shots? Who's being asked to play defense and not really score a ton? Like that's the interesting part of watching Team USA. Outside of that, they're incredibly boring. And this same concept moves outside of basketball and is very relevant in the world of football, especially when it comes to defensive linemen. Now, I bring this up because I've gotten some pushback on my defenses of Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo, which is fine. You're allowed to be wrong. Totally allowed. Okay? Like the number of snaps that you have to share impacts your numbers. Okay? For context, here are Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo's numbers from last season. Kwity Paye had 52 tackles, 17 pressures, 8.5 sacks in 16 games with 702 snaps played. Dio Dangbo, 38 tackles, 22 pressures, 8 sacks in 17 games and 622 snaps played. Now, I want to compare those with some of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Okay, let's start with the guy who led the NFL in sacks last year, TJ Watt. Okay, he led the NFL in sacks last year with 19. Dude was dominant. Has been over the past several years. He's probably the best edge rusher in the NFL. And last year, he lived up to that standard. 68 tackles, 50 pressures, 19 sacks in 17 games, and 935 snaps. That is 233 more snaps than Kwity Paye, and that is 313 more snaps than Dio Dangbo. I would hope that he has better numbers if he's going to play that many more snaps. How many snaps you play matters. Just like how in basketball, the number of shots that you take matters, because the more shots you take, the more points you're probably going to score, right? But if you have other good players on your team, you're just not going to get as many good shots. That's just the way that it works. Continuing on here, Josh Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars. 66 tackles last year, 46 pressures, 17.5 sacks in 17 games, and he played 880 snaps. That is 178 more snaps than Kwity Paye, and that is 258 more snaps than Dio Dangbo. Once again, I would hope that Josh Allen has better numbers if he's going to play that many more snaps. Khalil Mack, same thing. 74 tackles last year, 36 pressures, and 17 sacks in 17 games. Okay, and of course, he played 934 snaps, 232 more than Kwity Paye, and 312 more than Dio Dangbo. Of course, his numbers are better. Now, I don't want you to get this misconstrued. I'm not insinuating that Kwity Paye or Dio Dangbo are better than or as good as any of the players that I just listed above. Okay, but if Kwity Paye and Dio Dangbo had been drafted by teams with less defensive linemen, then they'd be double-digit sack guys. Seriously. And all of the Chris Ballard haters would be upset that he didn't draft one of these two dudes. Like the year that the Colts drafted Kwity Paye, they took him 21st overall. The Titans had the 22nd pick, and they took a defensive back. If Chris Ballard had let Kwity Paye slide by and the Titans had taken him and he'd been a double-digit sack guy last year because he just played more snaps, Colts fans would be really upset. They'd be like, Chris Ballard, you idiot. Okay, and that's the thing. If Dio Dangbo and Kwity Paye both played an extra 200 snaps, like some of the other guys in the NFL do that had more sacks than them last year, then they would have been double-digit sack guys. It's basic math. And also, if all those players that I just listed, Josh Allen, TJ Watt, Khalil Mack, if they had played less snaps, then their numbers would be much lower. Okay, you could argue, and I am going to make this case, that Chris Ballard has done such a good job at drafting defensive linemen that it hurts him in the way that we view the guys that he's drafted. Because they're 8 deep. That's the goal, at least. That's what Gus Bradley said, after training camp 2 days ago. They want to be 8 deep. That way they can consistently rotate guys in and out, which then lowers the number of snaps that these guys play, which then lowers their overall numbers. But if the Colts had, 6 guys that actually could play, on the defensive line, then these guys are going to be on the field more, which is going to lead to better numbers. The fact that Chris Ballard has actually done a good job at accumulating talent on the defensive line hurts the way that we view the defensive lineman that he has taken. Okay? Because on a rate or per snap basis, like Kwity Paye was pretty good last year. Daiwa Dangbo was the best pass rusher the Colts had last year. He just wasn't on the field as much as these other guys. Chris Ballard is simply a victim of his own drafting ability or talent acquirement ability when it comes to the defensive line. I'll take it a step further. The only thing Chris Ballard has done wrong as the general manager of the Colts was not finding a permanent Andrew Luck replacement sooner. And I really don't know if he messed up in that regard either. Okay, heading into the 2019-2020 season, Andrew Luck retires. He's like 28 years old, prime of his career. Everybody was stunned. Everybody was stunned, and they should have been, because in what world does a quarterback in the prime of their career just say, you know what, I'm done? It doesn't happen. Andrew Luck's literally the only guy who's ever done that. Okay, and so they play, that 2019-2020 season. They got Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. They go 7-9. It's pretty mediocre. Okay, and here's the thing. It's hard to be mediocre with a backup quarterback because that's what Jacoby Brissett is. Okay, Chris Ballard's ability to evaluate talent and bring in guys at other positions is what kept them from being able to draft a quarterback in that following draft class, the year that Joe Burrow and Tua and Justin Herbert and all those guys went. Instead, they had the 13th pick, and they traded out of it, okay, because they realized it's like, we're not going to get a good quarterback with the 13th pick. So they passed, and they're like, we'll trade out of it. We'll accumulate more picks, whatever. And then what do? They bring in Phillip Rivers, and they go 11-6, which is a good season. Okay, that's a good season. And so, look, when you go, they went 11-5, not a 17-game season quite yet. So they go 11-5, and they're like a good football team. It's like, hey, they made the playoffs. They won 11 games. That's pretty good. But here's the thing. When you win 11 games, you're not drafting the future quarterback of your franchise with the 21st overall pick. It's not going to happen. Okay? And it's like, well, Chris Ballard should have traded up. Yeah, because teams that are bad are going to give up the opportunity to draft a potential superstar at the quarterback position, the most important position in the sport. Okay, so he sits at 21, and he takes Kwity Paye out of Michigan, right? And then what happens? Phillip Rivers doesn't come back, and things get kind of ugly, right? Things weren't great that next season, or maybe he was back. I don't remember. Either way, the Colts managed to once again be average. They had the 16th pick. They traded out of it because they're sitting there. It's like, hey, we're not going to get the future of our franchise with pick number 16. And and this was a bad quarterback draft. The first quarterback off the board was Kenny Pickett. Praise the Lord that the Colts didn't take Kenny Pickett because he's a backup. I don't even know who he's playing for anymore. He's not even with the Steelers. Okay, so there wasn't a quarterback available in that draft, so they took someone else instead, which is fine. I would say that's a good move rather than taking, Kenny Pickett or reaching on a quarterback that's currently a backup somewhere. And then 2023 rolls around, and Matt Ryan's terrible, and the Colts are terrible, and so they have the 4th overall pick, and they finally take a franchise quarterback. It's like we can sit here and we can blame Chris Ballard. It's like, hey, man, he should have done better. I don't know. I feel like he did a pretty good job. He just didn't have a quarterback because Andrew Luck decided to retire when he was in the prime of his career. I don't think that's exactly Chris Ballard's fault. Seriously. Didn't realize it was his fault that Andrew Luck got hurt snowboarding. I would say that that's Andrew Luck's fault. Okay? Chris Ballard has done a good job at, maybe not every other position, but the offensive line outside of, 2 years ago, has been pretty solid. He's done a good job of bringing in multiple defensive linemen that can play at an NFL level. Okay, the receiver stuff, has it been great? No, but, he drafted Michael Pittman Jr., who's been pretty good. He drafted Jonathan Taylor, who was the best running back in the league a couple years ago, right? And if he can stay healthy, maybe he'll be one of the best running backs in the league. Once again, he hired Shane Steichen, who everyone, including me, is very high on because of what he's done with Jalen Hurts and what he did with Justin Herbert when he was, helping coach the Chargers. Chris Ballard has done a good job. And here's the thing. If Chris Ballard had done a worse job at drafting these other positions, then the Colts would have gotten their potential future of the quarterback sooner. But because he did a good job at the surrounding positions of the quarterback, we had to wait a few extra years. And you guys are upset about it because let's be honest, Colts fans are spoiled. Okay, you guys went from Peyton Manning, one of the best quarterbacks ever, straight into Andrew Luck, who would have been one of the better quarterbacks ever if he hadn't decided to randomly retire when he was 28 years old because he didn't want to rehab injuries anymore. Okay, so you guys have had to wait 5 years, right, to potentially be good again. And it's all because you haven't had a legitimately good quarterback. Okay, like I don't care who the GM is. I don't care who the coach is. If you don't have a good quarterback, and the 1 year that the Colts did when they brought in Phillip Rivers, they went 11-5. Okay, if you don't have a great quarterback, you're not going to win games. Okay, so we can push back on everything that Chris Ballard's done. That's fine, whatever. Every fan base has to have a guy to blame. Every fan base has to have a scapegoat. I guess that for the Colts, that scapegoat is Chris Ballard, even though it should probably be Andrew Luck because he's the one who left you high and dry. That's going to do it for the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate it. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way next. Listen to that on 1430 AM, 99.5 HDMI 2 if you have a car, less than a decade old. Subscribe to the Indy Sports Ticket YouTube page. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. I'll be back again Monday. Have a nice weekend. The Real Jonathan Smith Show, 10 to noon on Monday. Coming at you. I'll talk to y'all then.